Okay, welcome everyone. Hi there. This is messing around on a Friday afternoon or morning because it's going to be done at 11 in the morning, not noon. So it's like, okay, morning. I should change my title. I maybe have to have a whole new bunch of thumbs about this. We'll just see what happens. I don't see anyone here yet, so no one's around. Oh my God, I should have said, oh, okay, whatever. What WTF, right? What WTF? Greetings and welcome, everyone. A brief update. This is the week my lawyer team sent my reply to the thing at school. I was told by a friend that that Catholic University had no English. The Catholic University also had no English language program. Therefore, there's no real options there. So I kind of like suffocated. I was hoping to be able to be fine, but the argument was that maybe I'd find some work. So I have to email him sometime this week about, can I teach Beg? Be Mr. Can I have a class, please? And we'll see what happens. I taught my class. I ended my class. Two of my classes I ended up. Monday, I will have to go to a election meeting for the election of the University of Warsaw rectorate. And now I'm told that there's going to be a list of candidates. So they're rigging the game in that sense. A certain bunch of people are trying to rig the electors. I think they should not. I think they should have the electors at the same time meeting as was done last time, but they didn't like what happened last time, and therefore they're trying to rig the game. Fortification underway, typical in that sense, right? The powers that be wish to protect their interests. So, well, that's that. I don't care about that. I have on Tuesday, I'll finish my classes, and their papers are due at the end of this, basically the 8th and 9th of February. So my two classes who are writing papers, groups of people, 4 groups of people are going to be turning their papers in on the 8th and 9th. So I got work to do in the beginning of February. I'm still grounding my video structure. I'm still doing Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and I'll talk about that. And we'll talk about the ethics in that sense today a little bit more. In that, why am I doing? Some things about I've been studying. Why am I doing it? Let's do that right now before I go into the rest of the topics. I've been using, as I said, we were using the Bartlett. I could. Part of me has also been occasionally pulling out Joe Sachs's translation of this about that. This is that. Oh God, why am I making a mess here? Right? Sachs's translation, which was not early 1999, 2000s. This is 2011, 2012. I think. Yeah, 2011. This came out. And then I also been looking at the Greek, and particularly the Greek edition I've been using is the Bywater. I should use another edition. I've been trying to find the other edition, but only the Bywater is the big one. I can go to the Loeb, but the Loeb has issues in the Greek text, and I've been wondering. It's been kind of pay attention to the question of looking at the Greek, but I've also been looking at some other ones. This is the Crisp by Cambridge, the Crisp edition of this, which is interesting. It's more analytical and kind of the historical approach. Again, this was published when? Was done early, what year? 2000. I don't see the year in this. This is interesting. 2000. This was 2000. So the Crisp and the Sachs are contemporaries. I think it's responding. I think Crisp was kind of responding to the idea of this new translation. There was always one of the old translations in the 1970s was Apostles translation, which people used, and of course the Ratman of 1920s, 1930s. There was Irwin's translation. In the 1960s, 50s, and 60s, there was Martin Oswald's kind of Kantian translation. In 1950s and 40s and 50s, there's McKinnon from University of Chicago, who kind of also gave a kind of Kantian translation. The Oswald translation was, being Oswald was a classical scholar, his translation was better than this. McKinnon's was kind of a modernization of the Jowett or Jowett-esque. But then turn of the century, what do you call it? 1940s, 50s, and 60s, there was the what is it? The Burnett translation of it, which is the kind of mainline academic, classical scholar and philosophy types like the Burnett, and they will use it. This is aspects of it. This is usually found in. Again, Burnett is a modification of the Jowett to a degree in that sense. In fact, the classic, the complete work, Burnett is responsible for the so-called complete Aristotle, right, which is then published again by what is it? It's in America, in England, it's Oxford. I think it's Oxford, but in America, it's done by Princeton. The complete Aristotle, 2-volume complete Aristotle. One of the books that I used as an undergrad, I used, of course, I would use Rachman's Loeb as learning the Greek, but also I would use the Burnett, not Burnett, sorry, the Oswald translation. When I took one of the course on thing, I looked the Oswald. The teacher was using, I think, I don't remember who. The teacher in the class was using a different translation. He wasn't using a translation that I remember, and I think it was McKinnon. That's why he had a book that had the Aristotle's Ethics and Politics together, and I think the translation was kind of E. And since I already, as an undergraduate, followed it, the translation by Barker's translation of the Politics, and I was constantly using already the Rachman. I found out, actually, no, I think as a freshman, I was introduced to at my first freshman class, the teacher used the Bobbs Merrill Oswald, and that's how I first came across it. So, okay, so I'm used to different transitions. The Oswald is a classical scholar, but he was at the same time, in some translation of the Greek, he followed what we call the traditions of philosophy. He deferred to the certain traditions and the idea of not only Kant, this idea that Kant, we get the idea of the practical reasoning, and therefore phronesis and was called practical reasoning versus, and that Sophia became theoretical reasoning, and this following Kantian a kind of it gave and this was similarly done to McKinnon too. So when you read McKinnon's and also Oswald's translations of Aristotle's Ethics, it sounded Kantian, okay, and there was and that's a distortion, and that was the distortion. In fact, that's what the apostle, this guy who had his own translations of all the different things in the 1970s, tried to respond to this kind of wanting to correct Aristotle. Was one of those good additions. And I remember, this is what we used with. I had a course with Larry Arnhart when he taught the ethics. He preferred the apostle. But by the time I took a course with Arnhart, I kind of didn't like the apostle. I got hooked on to Terence Irwin's translation of the Nicomachean Ethics, the first edition. Then starting in the early 1990s, it came out the second edition. And now I'm told he has the third edition published by Hackett. There's still problems with it. At least I haven't looked at I didn't know about the third edition. The second editions had an issue, and that was he translated phronesis as not prudence, but as intelligence. And that's kind of weird in that sense. In fact, if you ever saw my copy of Irwin's thing, my Irwin paperback edition of Irwin, the light blue cover of the Ethics, it had lots of margin notes lots and lots of margin notes to the Greek of correction of translations. But it was my preferable one for my graduate years. Only in 1990 does Sachs, 1999, way after graduate, I already got my doctorate by this time, 5 years into my doctorate, having my doctorate and teaching at schools and going to Europe. Sachs's translation of the Ethics, Joe Sachs's translation of the Aristotle's Ethics, based on his translation of the physics and the metaphysics, became something to turn to. Now, another new edition is C.D. Reeves' edition. Reeves started to get a grant. This is published in what year? This was done in 2014. Starting in the early 2000s when he retired, he had a weird situation. He has a wonderful post. He moved from where he was to the University of North Carolina, and as an endowed chair, he's a distinguished philosophy professor. Basically, the Greek, all the socialists, what they call the fraternities, the Greek fraternity organizations, put together a big endowed chair with very endowed money to allow him to translate Greek texts. And Reeves has been doing the whole of Aristotle throughout a new edition. He also has a new, back in the 1990s, he did a translation of the Politics for Hackett. But then part of this series, the new translation series that he's doing, he did a whole new translation of the Politics. So therefore, this is what I call the different translations of Aristotle's Ethics that are out there that kind of inform why I've been looking at them when I teach. When I'm doing the things, I kind of will constantly look before doing the reading. I will go look at these, and particularly Irwin's and Reeves and Irwin's has extensive notes at the back of their editions, so that's why it's been useful to do. So that's what why I've been doing what I've been doing. I am not seeing anyone. The usual crowd isn't here today. And maybe I have to warn them, saying, "Hey guys, where are you?" Maybe it's too early on a Friday. Maybe I should need to move this on a Saturday. Yeah, but we'll see what happens. So that's Aristotle. What are you doing now? Back to the today's kind of themes. I kind of listed 4, right? There's 4 themes on the list of the thing up there. It says. It's about a fight I got in social media. Oh no, social media. Somebody, a philosophy guy who's kind of like is kind of a star on the what I call the conservative libertarian circle. He wrote a book on postmodernism, understanding it, and became kind of a niche bestseller. And it's kind of the anti-postmodern book, right? And he's, I'm not going to mention his name. But he's been posting on Twitter and on Facebook. He's going, "Oh, collectivism bad, collectivism, individualism versus collectivism." And he was saying he had this snide comment that people who are collectivists, they care more for their group activity versus those who don't take pride in their own actions and put. Speak of their family, speak of their nations and nationalism, are really collectivist. This is what I call. I'm making fun of that because it pisses me off. And this is something I really didn't like about the early Jordan Peterson. When Jordan Peterson was kind of like saying, "Well, collect." In fact, when many of the alt-right people went after Jordan Peterson, saying, "Hey, wait a minute, you're criticizing the postmodernists, but aren't there some group identities that are meaningful, like ethnicity and things like this, that maybe we shouldn't attack we shouldn't throw out completely ethnicity and group identity because." Human beings are social animals. Human beings are these things. Should we not throw this on? And it's not Peterson. I think Peterson has evolved more in that sense. He's kind of gone differently in that he doesn't use, even though he attacks social, collectivism and collectivist ideas, he's warning about the extreme of collectivism in terms of communism. And that's it. The problem is that communism, we associate collectivism with only communism. But the term collectivism means any kind of group or social construction. And the danger of many of the libertarians and Ayn Randians who throw around the anti-collectivist, it's throwing the baby out with the social baby out with the bathwater. A man's social dimension. Now, of course, the criticism of social is a meaningless term. Well, that's a whole debate in itself because of the problem of, this is that infamous Margaret Thatcher quote, relying on Hayek. There's no such thing as society. Well, I like Margaret Thatcher. And I understand what she was criticizing, but the statement, there's no such thing as society, well, yeah, she's technically right. It's not a thing. Society is nothing but a set of social relations between people and groups and activities. And it's an aggregate of all those activities. It is that thing. It's the same thing with economy. There's no such thing as economy either. Hey, Margaret, the economy, there's no such thing as economy. Why? Because what is the economy? It's an aggregate of all the activities of buying and selling and negotiating of services and of either activities of buying and selling of services or labor or activities, and this collective of buying and selling of all these activities and together in different networks are the economy, right? The economy is not a tangible thing. So therefore, like the society, these are aggregates of behavior. And therefore, there is no thinginess there. There's no such. So therefore, the statement, there's no thing as society, no such thing as society. Well, yeah, true. But in another sense, false. So this is the problem with collectivists. This is collective, that, these people who champion this dichotomy, it's you're either a collectivist or an individualist. This is, I like the term throwing the term out the bathwater. This is a false dichotomy, an utterly false dichotomy of a choice between the individual and the collective. The problem here is human beings need both. The human being, if you over-collectivize human life becomes repressive, destructive, and things. So to say, my choice here as the collective, that's false. But the choice to say that I'm an individual, well, that's false also. Because why? We'd go mad. Take an individual and throw him in a desert island, right? Remember that movie, Stranded? I forget, a famous movie in the 1980s and 1990s with Tom Hanks. He's stranded on an island. And he's left alone. And he goes, to keep his sanity, what he does is he takes this Wilson basketball and calls him Wilson, right? And he creates a basketball. He puts a face on a basketball, and that he then treats this thing as a person. He needs it. And anyone who studies the way survivors of the Gulag and survivors of detention, they keep themselves sane by creating an alternative personality, an imaginary thing, in order to keep themselves from going insane. Otherwise, you'd go insane without other people. Human beings need other people. Also, the problem with this individualism and that, and in fact, I got into a little snat about this. Well, everything is a contractual. No. Contractual basis of society assumes that everything is voluntary. The problem with human being is that he's not, I'm sorry, we don't volunteer to be born. And we don't choose who are we born to. And therefore, we don't choose our race. We don't choose our ethnicity. We don't choose our sex. Oh my God, we don't choose our sex. We can choose it. Nonsense, okay? You can choose to mutilate yourself and chop it off, or you seal it up and try to make a new thing. But you can try to deny what you are and try to pretend you're something else, but you can't be it. You are what you are, and it's not a matter of choice. Humans get choice. We can make choices in that sense. We can choose which spouse we're going to have, even though attraction is something we don't choose. It is something, in other words, sexual attraction is as much a thing of biochemistry as it is about choice. We may, in other words, human beings are tied not only between the question of choice and it's between the voluntary and the involuntary, I argue. And therefore, in this sense, the human being is like this complex things of both voluntary and involuntary aspects that we operationalize ourselves in to live well, try to survive and to adapt so that we can prosper and survive and flourish, not demise and get sick and this. And therefore, in this idea of the individual, yes, we have our consciousness in ourself is the egocentric and sent to this the sense of me, the I who wants, who does. But we need others. We have to live others. The life isolated on itself is not worth living. Okay. So therefore, we're individuals in sense of our consciousness and our animal natures, but our animal self, our awareness of what we are. But we are nevertheless inclined towards groups and others together, to live together for the mutual. In other words, the individual by himself will not survive. He can't, in other words, he didn't come into being. Remember, that's that famous line. I mean, I love David Starkey always bashing those who believe all men are free and equal. All men are born equal and free and blah, blah, blah. No, he quotes that famous line from St. Augustine that no, we are born between piss and shit. We are born screaming, yelling, utterly weak and utterly dependent. Okay, we're not free and independent. We're not free and equal. Each one is born with certain uniqueness towards and separateness, and we have certain things that are beneficial and some things that are not beneficial. And each one of us are unique in this sense. But then we're not utterly unique. We have aspects of things we share in common and things that we then differentiate on. So therefore, this is the complexity of being human. And therefore, to simply put this in a individualism versus collectivism is a false dichotomy, and it's misleading. This is why I understand why it's cool. Ayn Rand is kind of a mouthwash to get rid of Marxism, but Ayn Rand by herself goes too far. Okay, it's a line in Aristotle saying that, of course, the deviation. If you try to hit the right thing, sometimes the extremes are these extremes are one is going to be worse than the other, right? And therefore, it's the middle point. The right thing is kind of something maybe that there may be these two things are kind of closer to each other. But here, in terms of the individual, we're both. It's not one or the other. And if we take it to the extreme of one or the other, human living is less beautiful, less well, less good. This is kind of my response. And if someone wants to clip this and say, "Oh, this is Bates's response to the Ayn Randians," okay, this is the problem. Ayn Rand is like I grant. If the only thing you hear is social justice, leftism, and this idea of collective good, let's go for the revolution and die for the revolution, and everything must surrender to the revolution. Now, that's a moronic attitude. But me is just as moronic. Okay, these are kind of extremes in that sense. And in fact, I've always looked at Ayn Rand's novels are basically unreadable. I as a young reader, I remember reading it, and I remember reliving it. It's like even her Fountainhead. It's like exaggeration. Yes, the artist. Okay, we should. The innovator is something worthwhile, but the innovator does not have a right, does not live at the. In other words, he's inhuman. He becomes. In other words, I mean, I've always liked what's his Whitaker Chambers' review of Ayn Rand. It's a vicious takedown, but he's right. In other words, Ayn Rand, her characters are kind of rape fantasies in that sense. There's unrealistic realities of this, not real people. And it's kind of an extreme kind of character. Yeah, yes, we can say, okay, I understand why many people, in responding to the kind of collectivist vision of the left, will look towards Rand as kind of responding against it, right? It is the opposite of this. But if you take it to, in other words, again, if you take these two things are opposites. If you go too far towards the other, and you go too extreme towards the other, this is as inhumane as the other. And that's why we have to be, this is why we must understand of human beings as social animals or political animals. Actually, the Greek is, why do you use social? Because it's supposed to be, the Greek is political animal, Aristotle, political animal. But, and I agree that I don't like the term social animal because it's a looser construct. In fact, it's more, in truth to the word where society comes from, it's more voluntaristic. In fact, if you understand where the word society originates, the language of it. But the problem with the word in English, ordinary use of English, society and community are kind of synonymous terms. We almost treat them as interchangeable. People, in fact, we're synonyms in that sense. The ordinary English treats them as synonyms, synonyms, right, of each other, that there can be interchangeably thrown about, like there's no difference. But the real ideas behind them are different in that sense. And that's the problem. That someone criticized me, a friend criticized me, shouldn't you not use what everyone else uses in that sense? But, if I'm stuck with, I'm talking to everyday people, I'm going to be using the everyday language. You're stuck in the everyday language. I could talk about the political, but then people think, oh, he's talking about statism. Oh, he's a collectivist. Burn the collectivist. Burn the collectivist. No, I mean, the man is a political animal does not mean statism. Government, it doesn't mean that everyone's government. Political means that we live together in share a life together. We live in community. Oh my God, he's a communist. Oh my God. No, but again, this is this idea that we live in this sense of identity. Our identity as human beings is found within a network of others. We are born into one. We're raised into one. And to say that we to only focus on the individual just is a distortion, as it would be to emphasize everything as merely the greater group. Oh, humanity, this is the radical left position. We talk about humanity. It's for the sake of humanity. Well, but there's nations. But then again, what happened to the sacrifice of the individual or the family? In other words, we have to understand what the Greek meant by koinonia. The koinonia at the extreme was humanity, but that's so broad. And that we can't fulfill our nature as human being at that level. We have to, we seek the level of koinonia or commonness. In fact, right, that commonness, that shared togetherness that allows us to, he says, I'm bilingual, translating one language from another is a nightmare. Imagine translating Greco-Roman Greek into Latin to Western languages. It must be. Well, it's true. Yeah, this is a problem. That's why you have to constantly look at the original and understand the origins of how the terms develop. You have to look at meanings of words as they evolve in their meaning. Language terms evolve in this fundamental sense, and that's why we have to look at this. And this is why I'm kind of leery when people speak of this individualism. It's sloppy. But then by me using the word society, it's being sloppy also. But that's less sloppy than that. Again, more and worse. Well, that's my little my rant about that issue that week. What is the other issue that I talked about? Okay, Graham McAleer in today's issue of Law and Liberty online gave a review of Glenn Ellmers' book, Glenn's book. Where is my Glenn? The Narrow Passage. Glenn wrote a book, and this is basically, Glenn's book is really a short essay. It's kind of a thought piece. I agree that this is a thought piece. And the review kind of criticizes it for not really flushing things out so much. But I think that's unfair to say that. I mean, this is what it is. It's a kind of introductory piece to some problems. It introduces some important themes of this. Glenn's a friend. Sometimes he bans me. Sometimes I pick on his mentor, Harry. I was a student of Mel Bradford, and Bradford and Jaffa used to have these debates. I'm kind of more on the Kendall. I don't dislike Jaffa. I have issues with Jaffa. I thought Jaffa goes too far. I appreciate him more than other Straussians. Am I a Straussian inclined? Yes, but I'm also kind of a Glenian inclined as well. I kind of follow the footsteps of Kendall and do more Kendall in this sense. And also I follow, in a great degree, the influence of my teach mentor, Mel Bradford. But I'm not strictly on Mel Bradford's line though. I'm not a Southerner. I can't be. I'm not a Southerner. I'm a damn Yankee. But I'm a true Yankee in that sense. I'm not going to, and I can appreciate the Southern position and the understanding of the thing. It doesn't mean I can be one. Okay, I'm still what I am in that sense, and the family, my identity, my community identity. Now, and what does American mean is not just one at the expense of the other, but rather this communal network. So, and this is where I disagree with Jaffa. Jaffa tends to be a liberal in the sense. His glorification of Abe Lincoln and the Equality Clause makes him fundamentally kind of a liberal in this sense. Even though oh my God, how could he wages war with the liberals, but the logic of his ultimate argument is kind of what we have is. This idea that as long as we share a common ideal, this is America. No, that's nonsense. Being a people means it's real in the real world. It's a bottom-up phenomenon, not a appeal from the top down. Okay, so even though I have my disagreements with the Claremont people on their, and I find myself more with agreement with my mentor Bradford and Kendall against them, I still agree with them a lot on their critique of the left. And the Claremont people have made, I had fights in the 1990s because they would call me a paleocon, and I never liked the term paleocon because I thought it was, it was kind of accepting the label of your enemy. This is a classic conservative mistake. The paleocon. I remember telling Bradford at the time before he died that I didn't like the term paleocon, even though I agreed with their principle. And even he didn't like the term I noticed. He never called himself a paleoconservative. He called himself a traditional man of the right. And Bradford even kind of retreated away from the word conservatism because he joked, even in the preface of one of his books, he said, how can we call conservative what is today nothing more than perpetuation of the outrageous, right? And Bradford's position and the position I felt in the 1990s, arguing in the Strauss list, the Leo Strauss list, with the Straussian, West Coast Straussians particularly, against equality and against this position, and defending things like we have to have restraints on immigration, and we just can't just have this idea of shared ideals and principles. Principles aren't enough. Life is principles are too abstract. We have to, principles are, want to speak the language of principles, you're at the language of Kantianism and destroying of natural right in the classic sense. It's modern natural, it's Kantian modern, a distortion of, it's modern national right within Kantian framework to speak of principles all the time. It's axioms, axiomatic. Using principle as an axiom in that sense. It's an arcade, it's something high. We don't politics. Natural right isn't a set of axioms. It is accessed in the particular, even though it's just a norm. It is the true. It is the true found in the particular, in the case. Right. This is this idea. So classical natural right is not axiomatic. It is prudential. It is phonetic in that fundamental sense. So therefore, that's my debate with the Claremont crowd, and but I respect the Claremont crowd, right? And I'll pick on Jaffa for being a 4F. I would do that. You pick on your friends a little bit. That's what friends do in the Anglo-American, in the English tradition, the Northeastern New Englanders, and the English. If you ever been with the upper middle class and the elites of English, they're only polite to their inferiors. If they're being polite to you, they're condescending to you. If you're among the English, and particularly the English upper middle class and the elites, when they're polite to you, they view you as an inferior. When they're picking on you, you are you're unequal to them. So therefore, when I pick on the clan monsters, this is out of friendship, not out of. It is my Englishness, okay. Even though I'm an American, even though I'm half, our mother's side of the family is Greek, my cultural identity is very English. I'm New Englander. We are English. Our cultural identity is Americanized. We are shaped by our American experience, but our culture, again, this is Tocqueville, chapter 2, chapter 2 of book 1, part 1 of Democracy in America, the Englishness of American experience. And this is, again, the paleoconservative position in that sense. But again, starting with Michael Anton as Decius, right? And then the whole, the Journal of American Greatness that came out with the pseudonym, and then the Flight 93 article, then Claremont published the Flight 93 article, right? And then Anton's, writings coming out of the closet, But even, Ellmers, in his book is kind of like following in this position of Anton and kind of being, Anton never finished his PhD. Glenn finally did. So it's kind of, he was working with government for a long time. He still is kind of, maybe quit. He's now full time at the Claremont Institute as a fellow. I wish I could get a fellowship, but he has to do all this writing. I teach for a living, okay, for the most part. Makes more money than me, but okay. But the review, McAleer's review, even though it was favorable, it was saying, well, this doesn't really flush things out. Well, even though he's being nice, it's kind of an unfair criticism because it's a short thing. It has a very specific purpose. The other criticism is it focuses on Strauss and doesn't focus on Vogelin. And this is where I might agree with McAleer if he bothered to make an argument. I mean, I find it very funny of McLean's criticism is that Elders doesn't fully flush out his argument and it's kind of only a thought piece. Well, Glenn does a better job than you do defending this idea of Vogelin. Your attempt to say Vogelin's important and why, you hint at symbolism. Well, I'm sorry, no, that's not where the strength of Vogelin lies. It's Vogelin's understanding of ideology and the way the ideology warps on human ability to undersee the world. Vogelin's this work on political religion of the 1930s, which then was fomented in his book on the New Science of Politics, lectures at Chicago New Science of Politics, and which is published as the lectures, and that where he brings up this concept of Gnosticism, of distorting Gnostic mind as false rationality, false conscious, a false framing of the intellect with false knowledge, a false mechanism of gnosis is a knowledge, but it's not knowledge as a rational knowledge. And the question of gnosis, in this sense, Gnosticism for Vogelin, is this false reasoning, a false consciousness, well, maybe false consciousness of the term, which it does is the mind, instead of experiencing the real world of experience, because Voglin's whole discussions, particularly in anamnesis, is about trying to get experience. In other words, and this is the difference between Strauss and Vogelin on the question of the primacy of experience. Strauss doesn't really look at this from consciousness point of view. Vogelin does. Strauss looks at it from language and look at the way language operates from opinion, belief. For Strauss, everything we start with opinion. He's Socratic. He's very Socratic. Strauss is very Socratic. He starts with the conception of language and the idea that how we start with opinion. We start with opinions and then move from opinions by testing it through truth, logos in that sense, and we move from opinion to knowledge, right? This is the famous Diameter's ladder like this, but this idea, this ladder of truth, right? We get into it. We see this in Plato's Republic, and where he talks about the divided line, right? This line of reasoning and this moving up from the different levels of reasoning, from the levels of opinion and doxa to things of the world, material, then mathematical concepts, and then the ideas themselves, right? Well, and I think this, Elder's book is looking at the crisis in today's world. He's trying to look at, he looks at the way the crisis of liberalism is in. He looks at Foucault's at both as a negative. He turns. Ironically, he does give a more favorable reading of Foucault, which McAleer kind of criticizes, saying that maybe it's too friendly. I'm kind of something. He says, a genuine question: do you think ideology is overrated in the sense that it conforms to set up axioms in which all principles are set up to something else? Yes. In fact, this is the problem. Vogelin argued that all ideology is bad. Vogelin really got mad at Kendall for participating in conservative. Kendall became very active with his student Buckley, trying to fight the liberals, right? And therefore, the idea is conservatism is an ideology. Well, Vogelin saw any kind of partisan contestation as deviating from what a philosopher should do. The philosopher should be above the partisan and always seek the truth. But Kendall was kind of like a fight. Kendall loved the fight. Kendall was and I think Kendall, and this is the difference. See, for Strauss and Socrates, the only way you can get through truth is through the partisan. Vogelin thought there was a means to get to the truth on its own. Excessive, and that's the big difference between Strauss and Vogelin here in this sense. That Strauss was very Socratic, who did not believe you could get to truth by any means but doxa, by opinion, by belief. Therefore, you had to take belief seriously. You had to take opinion seriously. And only through the contestation of belief and opinion do you get truth. Do you get through truth, which is the logos is what? The truing of what is correct and what's incorrect. Reasoning is nothing more than the mechanism by which we discern what is valid and invalid, true and false, useful, harmful, beneficial, things like this. And then once we discern that, we then know what is knowledge in that sense. There is something, and this is actually, what's his name? Taub, the kind of student of Heidegger, the Jewish student of Heidegger, and Nietzsche Schmidt guy. I forget how you say Taub's first name. Which Strauss hated. Not Strauss, but it was Strauss's friend. Schromm despised Taub. Taub wrote a book on the political theology of St. Paul. Taub wrote a book about Genesis. Wrote a famous book in the 50s, late 40s, on Gnosticism that kind of Vogelin kind of, oh yeah, this is interesting. That was basically stealing someone else's work. In fact, it was Schrolem considered Taub at best a stealer of other people's ideas, not an original thinker. Strauss has basically repeated Schrollem's understanding in that sense. Vogelin, but it was Taub who says of Vogelin that Vogelin's critique of Gnosticism in itself has a Gnostic element towards it. And Vogelin smiled. This is that moment where Vogelin and Taub are debating each other, and it mentioned that this criticism is mentioned, and there's something Hegel, this criticism of this is, like at the same time, Vogelin also kind of suggested that Hegel is kind of Gnostic, right? This is this idea of modern philosophy is the problem is Gnostic. This is the tendency in Vogelin scholars and like this to see Protestantism, the Reformation, the early Renaissance thinkers, and then the Enlightenment thinkers, and then even the later the more radical Enlightenment, the radical of the post-Enlightenment thinkers of the French Revolution and post-Romanticism as not and the idealists like Kant and Hegel as kind of Gnosticism, a kind of alternative. An ideology is a Gnosticism. It's an alternative rationality. It's a lens. I'm responding to Viticus's point here. It is an alternative rationality, so that it distorts reality. Okay. Now, a colleague said, I last week on Wednesday I attended a thing about wokeness, and I explained that wokeness is a byproduct. It is the one who is possessed by the ideology. The awakenedness is the awareness of the issue that it gets you to embrace the ideology. My wife recorded it, but then she won't let me post the recording because she's afraid I'll get in trouble. Because I got in trouble already because I mentioned some colleagues in feminism and things like this, and she goes, "Oh no, she won't give me the recording." Where I gave I wish I had the recording of that thing. In fact, if they were doing the recordings, I might have been more prudent. But because the lack of the recordings, my prudence was kind of missing in that sense. So my wife may be right at that sense. But in that speech, I addressed the ideological conception of ideology, that Vogelin is very much the father. And this is what I would say to elders, Glenn, is that Vogelin's insight here is better than Strauss's, in the sense that Strauss really doesn't see the problem of ideology. And that's why he can't, for him, totalitarianism is only tyranny plus technology in that sense, right? He doesn't understand the aspect of consciousness that's involved with that. In other words, he misses the religious, he doesn't understand the irrationality. It's not only irrationality, it's a false rationality. It's not, in other words, this is not a question of irrational versus irrational. Okay. It is a alternative rationality that is false. That's Gnosticism. Gnosticism is a false rationalism that defines the world and defines your understanding of the world. And all ideologies are like this, but there is a difference. This is something I highlighted in my talk, that we have to distinguish. Liberalism is an ideology, but liberalism and communism and Nazism and communism are ideologies. Are all ideologies the same? No, there's a distinction. Liberalism and some ideologies are more open to reality. They're adaptive. They're open. Okay, I don't want to even get. This is that problem. This is why Vogelin went completely batshit over what's his name? Karl Popper's Open Society and its enemies. He went completely batshit on this because Popper's use of openness was, in other words, Vogelin argued Popper took Henry Bergson's idea of openness, found in his writings and his religious writings, and misunderstood them and misapplied them, and understood it in terms of open and closed societies, and looking at it and turning it within the framework of even modern liberalism, of that Plato is a totalitarian because it's involuntary. In other words, the community there accepts the involuntary, and that the modern world, we understand this as completely violent. The modern state, Hobbes, Locke, and the social contract understands everything is voluntary. That it's everything is done through the justice, and things are done through the ideas of consent. That the agents, and in fact, the agent society doesn't really have a difference between the private and the political. That there's, in other words, the political and the social are one in this sense. And therefore, this idea, oh my God, no distinction between state and society. That's the totalitarian. So that's how this idea, and this is a misunderstanding. This is why Vogelin and Strauss will make fun of Popper as kind of a dilettante in a, like, the shit you step on. Even though Popper gets some things right in terms of, as a student of philosophy history, his epistemology, his critique of historicism is somewhat right, but not completely right. He doesn't understand the depths of historicism. He is too much a positivist. He looks at historicism at one level, but he misunderstands what the real depth. And he doesn't see the interconnection between his own position and how the positivism he tries to defend against what he calls historicism, how they're more connected to each other than that. And this is because he is a second-rate mind. In fact, even the famous fight between Wittgenstein and Popper, that's accounted in that famous little popular book, Wittgenstein's Poker. Wittgenstein saw through Popper as a fraud as well. Anyone who is really intellectually understood, who looks at Popper and you see him for what he is. He's a second-rate thinker in that sense, and although right, he on certain things, and he was right on the Cold War. I have very conservative friends who like Popper because he was anti-communist, anti-Marxist, and I know some religious people who like him because he's anti-evolutionary, because he sees that, no falsification in Darwinian theory, so therefore it is not scientific. Now his own argument about Popper's own argument about falsification is an extreme position that goes way beyond the prudential of what falsification really, what is really meant by the need to have falsification. I dislike Karl Popper, but he is operated. His take on freedom of speech is essential, tolerant, accept the intolerant, yawn. But that's the problem about that. That is his position. Karl Popper's thing on freedom of speech is Locke. It's Locke's book on toleration. Come on, it's nothing new. I mean, look at Spinoza's. Look at what do you call Pierre Boyle. Of that, the overrated Loki. Yeah, that's true. So let me. I'm going to wrap up my review of the McAleer piece, because in many ways I thought that McAleer could have made an argument about Vogelin and that but that's not done. It's kind of like, in fact, therefore, from the point of view of his criticism, you didn't do enough. Well, I'm sorry, McAleer, you didn't do enough. So you were a worse violator than Glenn Ellmers were. Not elders. I don't want to say elders. Sorry, Ellmers. Glenn was. So I hope that kind of deals with that. And that the other thing. What is the other little kapooey? My messing is the other thing is. Well, maybe I shouldn't talk about it. I got some emails from the university talking about lectures, public lectures about we're going to have a lecture about perspective of, I'm not going to use the term LBGT, women and LBGT, which I mean the disadvantaged or the marginalized. Okay, the problem with this such is like we have to understand history through the eyes of the marginalized. No. No, 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 no. Why? Oh no, we should ignore them? No. But we shouldn't take it from their point of view. Because why? Because it's distorting. It distorts the world. In fact, this argument that you should do is an ideology. It is a conceptual ideology that distorts reality. We should be seeking to understand the real, not to be understand. In other words, we have to take. Therefore, we study. If we're going to be studying something and looking to the phenomena, we want to know the thing it is. We want to know the truth of it. Truth is our guideline. If we're studying and doing science, truth is our only lodestar. But if we're talking about living life and about politics, about living our lives to get better or worse, that's politics. Okay, we don't care about truth. We care about winning. Winning. That's the difference. Life is about winning and avoiding losing, right? Therefore, it's not about truth per se, but the truth. Knowing the truth helps us win or avoid losing, right? So, therefore, there is the connection between truth and our ability to know what is and what's not in order to do well. So, therefore, this is why truth is important, even in the question of winning. But winning is not about truth per se. It's truth helps you to win, but the goal is winning. Okay. The problem with modern intellectuals is that they understand science as winning and advancing their position. They're partisans. They're partisans to a vision. They're ideologues in this sense, pushing a vision of the truth. In other words, they're not pushing the truth as truth. It is give it like 5 or 10 years, backlash and division, that community, they'll be more prevalent within Generation Z. Most are apathetic, not priestly, social justice. Yeah, but that's you can't wait. The world is fucked up. You can't wait 10 years. I mean, this is what the conservatives thought that maturity would grow them. In the 1980s, when in the 1990s, when political correctness was really starting and getting its claws in and starting at the university to kind of marginalize. We can always argue that conservative voices were always a minority within the university. Okay, but starting in the 1990s, they were marginalizing them ever increasingly, so that today it's almost unexistent. Now, in other words, even the idea of you have rather, moderate liberals are so rare now. In other words, back in the 1950s, the majority of them were okay. We're not conservatives, we're liberals, but we're kind of common sense liberals. And the Marxists and the extremes were like this. But starting in the 60s and 70s, the radicals started getting bigger and stronger. The moderate voices, the liberals or common sense liberals became less and less powerful and older, and the younger became more radicalized. And then by the 80s, these radicalized hired even more radicals that tipped the thing, and that therefore a lot of these moderate liberals became conservative or neoconservative, right? And that the real conservatives were even gone by this time. That Harvey Mansfield is ever considered a conservative is kind of laughable. He was always kind of a mid-level liberal, and most Straussian, like Alan Bloom, is always hilarious. You look at all the Straussians; they were always more kind of New Deal liberals. I mean, my time with Glenn Frisch, I used to get in trouble because I grew up in an old staunch red Republican household. We have a joke. In 1933, 3 fascist leaders came to power: Hitler, Stalin, and FDR. Okay. He got mad. FDR is a hero. No, to me, FDR is a monster. He's a totalitarian. He destroyed America. He imposed the administrative state and the logic, and he basically threw the American Constitution in the toilet water. Now, of course, his rhetoric was he didn't have the contempt of the American people that today's leftists have. In other words, he would always, he praised religious. He didn't believe in religion, but he praised it. He praised the values of American values. In other words, he liked them. He praised America, whereas the modern radical left despises America and wants to make America what it ain't. Okay, so there, in many ways, yes, from the point of view of the crap monsters of today's left, progressive left, the woke progressive left, FDR is sane, but FDR still brought the destruction. In other words, it was what FDR did to the constitutional and political structure allowed these monsters to get in power, to get in control. And like the conservatives of the 1980s let the radical left win the universities. They should have started defunding the universities. They should have, in the 1980s, they should have either used the state legislature should have purged, but we can't have McCarthyism. No, either your choice, you want money, then you have to I'm sorry, if you're going to have public funds, conservatives need to be as equally present, or not equally, this marginally higher present than this. You cannot have this radicalism. You can punch the extreme hate. You can expunge the extreme hatred of America voice from the university. Those guys need not apply. The Howard Zinns of the world are fringe people who should not be the dominant voice. And then, when State Department people tell U.S. State Department cultural affairs people tell foreigners, well, the real person to study America is Howard Zinn. Of course, you create anti-American backlash. This is the thing about this, that the anti-Americanism is spread by the State Department, by not only their policies and their actions, but also by the pernicious left-wing ideology. Go look at the famous guy, Salad, the famous Egyptian radical in the 1950s comes to America, right? He comes to America, Sebib, I can never say his name, the father of the Islamic Brotherhood, right? The guy who he's the intellectual brainchild of the Islamic Brotherhood. They don't know. We're not going to send him to the South. We're going to send him to like California, some progressive place like this. And what happens when he gets there? Oh my God! The men and women are dancing in the hallways, and the men and women are interfingering. The women aren't conservatively dressed. Oh, they're dancing. Oh, America is the horrible thing. If they send him to a Southern Baptist school. The joke. He might have said, "Oh, America is great." The liberals, being liberals, send a conservative, a Muslim who has conservative tastes, to a liberal institution, and is thinking that, oh yeah, it's progressive, they'll tolerate him there. But he sees it and he sees, oh my God, they're doing what? Oh my God, America must be destroyed. Come on, this is the lesson you get from this, how liberals don't understand that most of the world still doesn't believe in LGBT rights and things like that. Oh my God, so we're going to make them more like us? This is the stupidity of it. No, we can tolerate stupidity. We shouldn't champion it. We tolerate deficiency. We're not going to champion it. So we're not going to send a third world person we're going to send him to some place where maybe because of his brown skin, these guys might not have liked him, but then he might understand that more than other things, right? Liberalism likes neutrality until relativism neutrality isn't a thing, until they realize that, hence the progressivism, right? In other words, until it affects them. Liberalism until it affects them, and that they realize that it isn't really realism. Neutrality isn't a thing. Hence the question of progressivism, the idea of progress, the myth of progress. Well, yeah, that's a whole big thing about that, right? So, so therefore there's this lecture about this. And I feel like saying, no, 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 no. That's the problem. It's nothing but ideological confrontation. In other words, we're having these people lecture about how great we should understand everything by these lenses of the problem with postmodernism is useful to correct the excess of the Enlightenment. There's a truth, like postmodernism has a truth. That is, the Enlightenment the claims of the Enlightenment went too far regarding rationality and the claims of possibilities of rationality. But then to throw out rationality altogether to will to power, that's a bridge too far. Again, this is the problem, right? The ancient world had a better understanding of the connection between the irrational and the rational, and the respect for the two, that the modern world, modern thought does not. It either goes too much in one direction or too much in the other direction, right? And that this is postmodernism is a rejection of the Enlightenment rationality, but it doesn't correct. It throws the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, this is why, look at Foucault. Foucault for me is nothing but Hobbes on steroids. Hobbes on steroids, but reversed, okay? Inverted. What is postmodernism but let's embrace the state of Hobbesian state of nature as a good, the war of all against all. Okay, in other words, I look at, oh my God, that the repressiveness of Hobbes and what he does about this. Therefore, let's embrace his opposite. No. Let's understand, that Hobbes was wrong, Hobbes' metaphor was wrong, and let's understand how man really is as a social animal, that the political community is not something artificial, that it's not the individual that we create, the artificial construct by which man operates, but rather we find man as what he naturally, the environment it naturally exists in, and understands the limit of what is possible, the limit of that scope, and how do you engage in it? That's how you should look at this. Okay, so that's my my diatribe about this idea of we should understand. Okay, if we're going to embrace marginalized viewpoints, then how about fascism and Nazism? If you have lectures on by LGBT people about their viewpoint of this, in this sense, right? It is really, really, really problematic, because if it's every viewpoint they don't believe every viewpoint is valuable, but only certain viewpoints. Okay, this is what's wrong with this. Once you accept that everything, viewpoints, well then why this viewpoint over that viewpoint? Shouldn't we pay attention? Let's look at the world, and let's measure the world and look at what is the norm? What is the average? Looking at behavior, we look at the behavior of certain types of behavior, and we look at the scope range of their behavior. The median and modal and the average behavior is the norm of most people, right? Therefore, we should look at what is the norm, and then look at the extremes as deviations. Therefore, if we're going to understand how things are, we should understand how they are. By viewing the deviation, you distort the norm. This is bad social science and bad science. And shame on them. But they're not concerned about science. They're concerned about brainwashing the young to make them view the world this way. And it's working in it. It's ideology. Stick to your guns. I'm Generation Z. I'm a Xer. I'm that borderline between Boomer and Xer. Okay, I'm the beginning of X. Okay, yes. Why Leviathan is talked. Well, honestly, Leviathan is not. I'm not going to criticize Leviathan totally. There is some sense to what Leviathan makes. We need consent. In other words, there's lots of truth in it. The only problem was he went too far. But why did he went too far? It was a corrective of the over extreme. So therefore, too much exceptional is not norm. Well, okay, what do you mean by exceptional? Too much exceptionalism, that's a different specific word. You mean too much of the marginalized or the extreme, right? We're going to take about the marginalized. We're going to take this outliers. The norm is that middle point. The too much marginalized. Okay, great. Okay, you should understand. You can talk about the marginalized, but you can't present them as the norm. They're not the norm. They are an outlier. They are deviations, either too much or too little from the norm. And to treat them as anything else of what they are, you distort reality. I don't want to say we should hunt them down, but I'm sorry, they're deviants in that sense. Hey, I'm a deviant. I'm a big fat person, man. I'm not the norm either. I'm excessive. I'm big and heavy, right? And therefore, that's not even, I'm sorry, no, homosexuals, less than 1%. Trans really intersex is way under 1%. The truly genetic intersect, the really hermaphrodite, and the boy who the one who is genetically male, but because he has too much estrogen in it, he is inclined to have more women be, or the genetically female who's been too much testosterone and like that, or then the purely intersect that happening at the signs of the formation of the testes. That is like one of 1,000, one of 10,000. It's not a percent. It's sub 1%. Pure male homosexuality that are high. It's about 7, 8. I can go up to 10 because men, if they can't control their sexual desire, will fuck animals, right? So therefore, yes, that's why in prisons men will fuck each other. Men will fuck anything. Okay. They joke about that. Those are the trisexuals. They will try anything sexually. They are the male. The female is less. Lesbians are. We have to distinguish also between lesbianism in the terms of social lesbianism versus actual lesbianism. Actual lesbianism, I suspect, is less than 1%, but social lesbianism, because of hostility of men and fear of men and fear of pregnancy and phobias from pregnancy and phobia of bad male relationships. Same thing with homosexual. A little bit of homosexuality is that the mother or the father can, if they're excessive abusive behavior of that, can lead to and particularly at the formation of sexual identity can lead to the opposite. In other words, a mother who over sexualizes or overweans the male child may actually lead the child to be adopting what we consider feminine sexual behaviors and being repulsed by women in that sense, because at that sense, okay, right? And therefore being attracted towards the male that was absent, right? The longing for the male that's absent. So therefore, there's a very complex conception of what's going on here. This is why I'm kind of sympathetic to Jordan Peterson's when he discusses that. Listen, we have to be understanding, but this is not the norm, okay? But when we take this idea that it's like this. I'm a heterosexual male. I'm interested in certain things. I have certain likes in this. I don't go about teaching my class my preferences. And yeah, my preference is raw. You have to learn what I think of my preference and my point of view and my world. No. As a teacher, I look at the subject matter and we try to understand the subject matter on its own terms and try to understand the validity of it. We do bring other points of view in, but they're there to be guideposts to understand to what they are. So you have to understand that as that. Yes, you can bring perspectives in it, but they cannot be the perspective you understand the phenomena or observe the phenomena through. If you do that, you distort reality. And therefore, I have a problem with these lectures in that sense that was being championed. Because it's like, okay, where's the Nazi teacher? Where's the Nazi? Let's bring a Nazi and have the Nazi tell us how great Jews are. Or we do that already. It's called Hamas. This is irony now. This is what all of a sudden all these nice Jewish liberals and Jewish progressives are like, oh, you're letting Hamas people talking about the river to the sea. Oh my God. It was the funniest hoisting on the leftist the Jewish, this Fox girl, Jennifer, the Jewish Fox, the girl, the Jennifer on the 5, that's always there, liberal Democrat, always, Biden's great, Biden. But when the October 7th event happened, she was like, oh, this is outrageous. No. I mean, I can also sympathize with there was a certain person criticizing this, and Ben Shapiro and those guys for crybabying about this, but not being for years being silent about immigration in the United States. They don't mind. These neoconservative Jews are very, and neoconservative non-Jews. I'm not going to say Jews are not, because that's unfair, because I'm philiosymmetric. I'm a Zionist. I'm technically a Zionist. I see myself as a Zionist, but I view myself as American first. I'm not Jewish. I'm Christian in that sense. So I'm not. I can't be a Jew in that sense. Am I opposed to them? Am I anti-Semitic? No, but I'm realistic about I'm not a Jew, and therefore this is this. I also understand that certain Jews, basically irreligious liberal Jews, are pathological to any society, including their own. Look how they're destroying Israel. Only when Israel became a nation, then Jews developed in this fundamental sense. This is why this is a very interesting aspect of this. You're saying, I'm sorry, you think I'm, a lot of my Generation Z people don't understand this. I'm not the. I kind of agree. I've always felt sorry for Nick Fuentes, because I understand what happened. How did he become that way? It was because of the liberal Jews and the liberal radicals, and particularly neoconservative Jews, who kind of force you to go Israel in that sense. Anti-borders, anti-borders when it comes to states. I'm anti-border. Listen, I believe in the border. I've always believed in the border. The purpose of a nation is to have borders. So that they're okay for the borders and their own thing, okay, but then you should be consistent, okay? And my point about the radical leftist Jews, I know Orthodox Jews. I grew up with Orthodox Jews. They look at the liberal Jews and they say they're not Jews. Go read what Hannah Arendt said about the Russian and Eastern European Jews as being Go listen to Germanic Jews about how they look at the Eastern Jews or the Jews from other parts of that world. It's hilarious. It's always fun to listen to it. The strong Orthodox Jews don't. The rule is, if you're not following the Torah, if you're not, that Jewishness is a religion. It is obedience to the laws of the Torah. Therefore, this is Maya Kahan saying, people would say, Maya Kahan is this radical race. No, he would deny that. No. If you understand this in terms of that this is your genetic or racial, then you are a racist. There's Jews who think, my mom was a Jew, I'm a Jew. No. Jewishness has nothing to do with the inheritance of your parents. It is the inheritance of the belief. This is what the Orthodox Jews that I studied with, and I kind of understand that with that. There is the idea of the genetic trait of what that was from that, but given how much the original Jews were flushed out all through the things, the genetic intermix is completely different, and therefore there's no genetic Jew in the true sense that the Nazis wanted. The Nazis are bad geneticists. Nazism and the Nazi science is bad genetics. It was mystical, and this has been my fight with someone like Academic Agent, who really doesn't understand biology, and understands all this stuff about this in terms of this kind of Spenglerian mysticism and spirit. And I'm kind of like saying, I'm shocked. I mean, this is the fight that that Tocqueville had with Gobineau. Gobineau goes too far. Gobineau is not Darwinian science. It is bad mysticism. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to jettison science for bad mysticism. And therefore, I'm going to stay with science, and this is why. And this is why, again, I'm opposing the postmodern genesis on the same grounds. I have personal convictions. I am this group. I am that. I have certain values. I prefer my own. We all prefer our own. Preferring one's own is a natural thing. The question is, to what extent does that then start harming you, harming your interests? And therefore, this is why I'm going to argue that you have to understand that this is a question of prudence, that this idea of this is why you have to understand that this is a question of advantage and usefulness, and when it's beneficial because the group flourishes. And that's the whole argument that evolutionary speaking, I'm sorry, biodiversity makes things better. Purebred things become moronic and stupid. Heterogeneity, to argue diversity is our strength is a nonsense statement understood politically, but genetically, no. Genetically, that is the case. Because this is a very important thing. It is a very important thing. The problem is, socially, if you're too diverse, you fall apart. You need something common. I mean, that's the Butler, not Butler. What is it? Boing along Putnam. The Putnam research that showed how it's yes, homogeneity is good, but too homogeneous. If it's too pure, it breaks down. It becomes repressive and doesn't work. If it's if you're too homogeneous, that then leads us to a breakdown of the society. Therefore, you need to be open to heterogeneity, but not majority heterogeneous. There must be a common majority, significant, above 50%, way up, above few points, but above 50% of a common group. And up to 60, 70% of a common, maybe even 80% of the common group. It's like this. This can tolerate diversity. But if it falls below 50, everything is this, like too much incest, too little is tribe versus tribe. Exactly. This is too, exactly. One is too, then becomes too much tribe. It's a balancing act. It's, again, the Aristotelian mean this. Well, so let me end up on that point in that sense. Let me now just do my last thing is the books. Okay, I've been a good boy. I've been busy. Aristotle, I've been doing this. My new book, I got the collection of writing of Florentine writers. I'm tying it with my good buddy, James Hannon. I know I'm not buddy. We know each other online, but he's at Harvard and like this. He's kind of conservative. He's come out of the closet. His new book on meritocracy and Renaissance Italy, Renaissance writers. I'm reading this kind of, but aren't you an ancient guy? Well, yes, I am, but this has been interesting. And then this book, this is kind of Foucaultian. It's Ruling Bodies. It's a dissertation done at Carleton under Walter Newell, probably. It's one of the people reviewing is Tom Pangle, really likes it. It looks at Arendt, Habermas. It starts out with looking at Arendt, Habermas, and Foucault and showing how they don't really understand something, and then becomes a commentary on Plato's Republic Laws and Gorgias on the question of correction and punishment, and the idea of punishment and like this. This is something that came today. I'm looking at this as interesting. My other new books, well, I've been getting these. I think I showed people these already. I don't know what the other one is over there probably. These are these wonderful editions of this that are really looking at. And the other book I got is I mentioned last week, the Electra, about the Michael Davis's student Benedetti. And then the Plato's Letters, again. These are some of the things that came last week. I mentioned before that. I started looking at it. I read the letters. That's one thing. Crown, I did talk about this over Christmas. This is a great book. Shakespeare's Crown. It was published recently by this. Am I writing something new? Yeah, I have to do I have to finish my Aristotle's. It's a piece. My writing thing today. I'm not doing anything. I have been fucking depressed because of this fight I'm having at the university, and I have to fill out some teaching self evaluation form the bureaucracy wants us to do, and the English version is unintelligible. And when I asked my director about some clarification, he made it worse. And I felt demoralized, really demoralized in that sense, because I don't do American studies. I'm in American studies department, but I'm a political philosopher, and I'm a fundamentally interested in ancient philosophy, my research is. So therefore, how does my published research, connect to my teaching is laughable. It doesn't. But that's not good, right? No, because they talk about, all my colleagues write about what they teach what they write. Now, do I have any knowledge of what I teach? Thank you for your nice comment about my books on Aristotle. Yeah. My real problem is, when I want to teach my course on, like next semester, I'm teaching a course on this semester, I'm teaching the Constitution. Am I aware of my constitutional law? Yes. Am I studied law? Yes, I've studied law. So I constantly read the current literature about things and my subject I'm teaching and the topic I do. I read everything in that sense. So I know my subject matter, and I keep up on the teaching subject matter of what I teach. So I teach methodology. Do I keep on taking methodology? Yes, I just don't rely on what I learned 30 years ago. I will go read and update. That's why I read anything. I buy new books on methodology. I teach American constitutionalism and constitutional law. When I teach my political theory things, I get to sneak in Montesquieu, Tocqueville. Yes, I do. And Locke. Okay, I know that stuff. And I maintain my scholarship on it. So that, yes, when I get to teach political theory, I get to do it, right? But my main non-historical course, I do federalism in Congress. Do I understand literature in Congress? Yes, I keep up on the scholarship of Congress and federalism. In fact, ironically, much of federalism has gone ever since the death of Elzar. The new federalist scholars don't really do federalism or local government law. I mean, ironically, the classics on state and local government are still books of 30, 40 years ago in that sense. I was supposed to go to a lecture last week on Thursday. I didn't go because I had other things to do. And I got yelled at for not going. A colleague who's talking about federalism of the 1880s, 1890s. When I asked him about what scholars and books he was writing on, using, he couldn't answer me. So why was I, first of all, I was afraid to go, not another reason, because I was going to know if he said something. And he said something I think was complete bullshit. I've always been told by people that I cannot you suffer fools badly. Okay. The woman I worked at Dallas, I worked in the bookstore, and the manager of the bookstore joked with me, Clifford, you have a problem. You don't suffer fools well. And therefore, what happens is when I go to lectures, when I hear someone who says something, I was at an event, and what they were saying was enough pissing me off. I get angry at it. And he goes, "Oh, you're going to have a heart attack." He was saying, "Oh, you're going to have a heart attack." I said, "No, if I didn't release it, I would have a heart attack." Didn't get angry and say it out loud, I would have a heart attack. I was afraid that I was going to go after this young colleague who spent 12 years and still hasn't gotten his PhD yet, and they hired him for 1 year, and he did, in promising that he'd have his PhD. He's not going to get this. I don't think he's going to have his PhD by the end of the year. And I wouldn't, if I wanted to see if he was going to give a lecture, he should have had a draft of something done. He didn't. Because this period is something I know about, this early federalism point, and it's not the argument that he's building them an estate. No. The state was established by the colony. How do you understand that? I want to hear what you mean by that. It's Tocqueville. Yes, Tocqueville is great, but what new scholar are you talking about? He talks about this idea of modern state and that there's no progression of this. Okay, so I teach Constitution. Next semester, I'm teaching the the Philadelphia Convention and the ratification debates and the ratification conventions. Okay, this is a big thing. I know the literature. In fact, I've been wanting to buy. I'm going to probably beg for a grant from somebody to buy the whole University of Wisconsin ratification series, like $2,000, $5,000 for like 15 volumes. I need to buy that to have it, because you can access it online a little bit, but it's a pain in the ass. It's not totally accessible. Well, that's what I'm doing now. But my own writing now, to answer the question, I'm doing book 5, chapter 4, 2 themes: the question of small things and the question of small things and the fear or coercion and fear, force or fraud, and showing how Aristotle is kind of proto-Machiavellian in that regard. These small little pieces that I have good significance. I have to finish them up. I'll get them done by the end of the year. I've been invited to write about Aristotle's political anthropology by October. Submit something of about 20,000, 30,000 characters, 20,000 characters. I'm going to rely heavily on Con Lord's piece, but work from it in that sense. Just summarize what the anthropology is, and then kind of repeat that. And it's going to be just kind of a summarizing of the theme of the journal issue is going to be political anthropology. So I'm going to talk about Aristotle's political anthropology in that sense. And then I'm going to have to write something. I have something done. I need to fix it to send it to a constitutional journal on the 4 changes that led to America, that changed America. The small things, the small little changes that happened, not the big constitutional changes, but the 2 pieces of legislation and 2 court rulings that fundamentally led to the fundamental alteration from the 1960s onwards of America, changing it fundamentally from the bottom up. Okay, and in that sense, both from the bottom up and flooding the floodgates of destroying the population in that sense. So that's the writing in that sense. So I have another writing plan. I want to finish my politics. I need to write about the treatment of preservation in book 5 of that, and I would like to get writing on founding, look at book 6 of the politics, about the question of founding democracies and founding oligarchies. And then as the wrapping up of my regime book. Okay, I think I'm going to do that in that sense. I have 5. I'm going to separate book 5. I'm going to separate Politics 5, chapters 10 and 11, and treat that as a separate book. I think you have to do that. And therefore, I'm going to not include, I'm going to have a little note saying that I'm not going to include this treatment of monarchy, change and preservation, because it's not regime. And rather, this is a separate book. This is, I'm going to call it Aristotle's Prince. I'll make a little small book on that, Aristotle's Prince, where we look at book 5, chapters 10 and 11. It is a mini book in that sense. Okay, but that's it. That's my writings. And we're at an hour and a half, and I'm over. I'm more than I should have been. Thank you, guys. I have 3 people here so far today that are now online. 2 likes. If you like it, like it. Come on. I mean, those of you still here, hit the like button. Those of you who are watching it after as we're no longer live, if you like it, hit the like button, please. We need to grow. Share it with a friend. Those of you who do this can encourage others to come watch us. And evict us. Go put that comment not in the live chat, but put that comment in the notes in after the thing goes live. Please, that would be very useful to kind of put an advertisement. Please, guys, encourage others to subscribe. Those of you who didn't like it, you can always say no. Those of you who don't like it, say why, so we can learn. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. Encourage. I've lost. The beginning of the week, I had almost. I was increasing to 400. I'm gonna have a 400 party. The second I get 400, I'll have the 400 party. online. I'll do a special. When I get 400, I will have a special. I'll break a special live stream just for the 400. But what happened, I noticed this beginning of this week, I went down to 282, and then today I went down to 281. Well, I'm losing. Oh my God, no. Okay, please subscribe. Get other people to subscribe. I think maybe my nice things about Jews things may have scared off some of the AA people who came over here. I have a whole thing I need to talk about AA sometimes, academic agents. He's been pissing me off with some of and I want to even talk about Southernism, Southerns, the Southern conservatism, because I'm a friend of Southern conservatism. I want to reach out to this guy, George Bagby, who was part of AA's thing. When I kind of mentioned that I was a Bradford student, he would say, "Oh, you should contact me." How can I contact you? I would like to talk to you. I think Bradford dying as when he did was both good and bad for him. Okay. Bad for him in the sense that, good for him in the sense that we don't know whether he would have went as cuckoo about September 11th and things like this as many of his people did on the paleo right and gone down. Because Bradford was always very critical of those who were too anti-American. And he was not a hardcore interventionist, but he said, listen, we're at that stage where maybe lesser evils are applied. And therefore, even though Bradford died before the whole Kosovo situation, I kind of was favorable. I began, before coming to Europe, I was against assisting Yugoslavia, but once I came into Europe and saw how fucked up the Europeans were, if the Americans didn't do it, no one else would. Okay, and but then people say, well, you went too far with the 9/11 stuff, because I agreed with doing this, but I totally oppose the way the Bush people and then the Obama people operationalized it. They fucked it up. They fucked up Afghanistan. They fucked up things. If they just simply waged war, they would have won. But by trying to bring in social, nation building, no, this fucking level things. Okay, when done right, yes, but it's never really done right, is it? Rarely done right. Another thing is, so therefore, please subscribe. Do this. You can follow me, my social media links below. If you want to help me to do what I do, okay, beg for money. You can always become a subscribe to our Patreon. I can understand that's why you can do that. You can assist. But you can always send me a gift card by Amazon. Find out my social media. You can go find my academic social media and my social media links below. Academics social media links are below again. And there you can find my address, my university address, and you can send me an Amazon gift card, either Amazon UK, Amazon US. I don't care. It's not. I'm joking. I mean, if you can send money by, send me. I'm not. I don't have enough people to have a tip jar like AA does and super chats. I'm not super chattable. Okay, but that's just the way it is. Life is life. Okay, well, take care. Have a good weekend. And I'm already at that 40 minutes. I'm almost way too long today. Okay, take care. Bye-bye, and have a good weekend. See you next week. And please watch the live today. There's going to be right at 6 o'clock. There was a new episode of my Aristotle done today. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.